right, hey there, and welcome to apparently another player two video review discussion thingamajig. My name is Tim Henderson. I've been playing the PlayStation 5 version of the third mainline installment of No More Heroes. Courtesy of Decibel. Thank you very much for the code. Because I have no idea what I'm talking about. Really, Paul decided it would be better to have somebody who does know what he's talking about on this call
Oh, is
with
he
me.
coming on later or?
No, he is not. That's why why you are here. You are here in lieu of him. So yes, we also have
Awesome.
Adam Rourke as the man who reviewed the Switch version of the game, which I guess this has turned out to be a timed exclusive. It came out about a year ago now. Am I correct?
Absolutely, yeah. I actually went back and I reread my review because I was like, how long ago was that? It felt like it was a while. So it must have been a 12-month exclusive. Must have been.
Give or take, yeah.
Mm.
Which I find interesting how that ended up the case. Because I guess the first thing I kind of want to state, I mean, like, full disclosure, we're actually recording this quite early. There's exciting convention things happening in Australia for the first time in like 2 or 3
Tomorrow.
years that are kind of forcing our hands to be either super early or super late. I've not actually had the code for very long thus far, but it really, like, booting this game for the first time over the weekend, like, it really didn't feel to me like most of the time, at least when it's at its best, like No More Heroes 3 in any way would benefit from being a handheld experience. Other than the fact it would have made it easier for me to have played more of it by now for discussion purposes.
So I actually I'm never really a fan of when handheld games or something try to put in a mechanic or a control scheme that benefits like motion controls that doesn't really feel like it's needed to be there. It's very rare you find games that actually put it in there because it makes the game better instead of
Well,
being
this
gimmicky.
franchise is infamous for using the Wiimote to jerk off your sword, so
They still have that, except you're now jerking your Switch, and I quickly
the
stopped that.
PS3 is just this on the right thumbstick.
I just hit the button. You have the choice at least, so it's not like they're forcing you to do that. And I actually remember that from the Wii version, even though I only dabbled in that version. I remember jerking the gherkin for that, and I was like, look, I find that funny. And I got to admit,
If my
like,
girlfriend could walk into the room while I'm playing,
like, what are you doing? Shh, I'm playing a game. It's still funny. Like, even when you're playing the game and you're watching, like, you're in the middle of this fight with your laser sword, and he's like, try to charge the thing
and
up.
if you're like fully down charged, like he gets two hands going, like to get it like
Yeah,
the
he's like,
last
come
little
on,
bit
come
of the
on.
way there.
It's funny, man. Like, and that's I think one of the big takeaways now. You're a little bit into it now, so it's not like you just played the tutorial. You're quite a few hours into it, and obviously the standout thing in this series, and No More Heroes 3 is exactly the same. It's that its humor is what makes it. It's absolute uncanny, weird humor that only seems to resonate with the game itself. I don't see that anywhere else.
I don't know if it's humor per se so much as just the uncanny in general. Like, it is
Yeah,
an
okay.
eccentric thing, which you
Very
would expect
eccentric, yeah.
from Suda51. Like, this is not isolated within his
No.
body of work
No.
by
And
any means.
I kind of feel like there are people around him that stop him from doing more than what he's currently doing with it, because I feel like it holds itself back in some regards. And I'm just like, you just know that there were meetings where like, so we're thinking this, and then I don't know, his Willy pops out or something. Like, he's like, that's the best idea. I'm like, no, we're not gonna.
I felt like these meetings are just like, yeah, we cannot legally launch it in half of the territories if we
Yes.
do this.
We will be banned from 80% of the countries we want to release this in. I guess I see it as like very much let's call it eccentric humor, because I do find it funny. The fact that it is just so like utterly over the top. Everything about it is over the top. You could just say it's extra in every facet.
I believe that's exactly what you said in your review.
There you go. Oh, I'm quoting myself. How about that? Sue myself for plagiarism there. So yeah, extra, and that's it's the easiest way to explain how it handles absolutely everything. And when I say absolutely everything, I mean the boss battles. You just the story itself. You just don't. I didn't know what to expect next, and it's so self-aware. So I'm trying to think about.
It's almost too self-aware. It uses it as I feel like it tries to use it as a crutch for its own
Yes,
shortcomings sometimes. It's kind of
yes,
like, yeah, it'd be better if we did this, wouldn't it? Wink, and I'm just going, I see your wink, but also, yes, it would.
and that's a. I wouldn't say it's a problem, but it can be when a game has such a cult following. And I'm not sure
Mm.
if you'd call it a cult following because these games weren't super popular, but they were popular enough. And if they got so much
No,
of
I
a
think
cult
it's fair.
following that you have these fans, sometimes you can make jokes and humor and gameplay decisions that really do like give a nudge and a wink to the players who are very familiar with it. And if you're not familiar with it, you can kind of feel left out. It's like, oh, what's the deal with that? It feels like that was important what they just said. And it's like, no, it wasn't important. But if you played number one and number two, you'd really like find that
Be
funny.
rolling on the floor right now, man.
You would just be cacking yourself. I found the levels of self-awareness that I like is the fact that there's these aliens. They want to take over the Earth
Planet.
planet, and there's 10 of them, and they're in ranks, and there's like, oh, and yeah, it's a ranking system, and you've got to fight them like starting from rank 10 all the way up.
Oh, it
I
is
mean,
literally just like here's. I think it almost as much says as much like here's a list of bosses. It
yes,
basically says it's a boss fight run, which gets to like I guess one of like my big issues with it. So I was absolutely in love with this game, like the presentation, like the fact that it like even did stupid shit. Like, so the whole premise is like there's this guy when he was a kid and he had an alien friend called Fu, I think, and it's
that's
presented
it.
in this like late 70s, early 80s anime style. It's even like 4-3, like washed out. And the promises come back exactly 20 years later. And then the new one looks like it was made, in the current century. It's like widescreen. And he comes back and he's now like an evil prince of the universe, fucking
Yeah,
whatever. Of course, the other guy, his friend, has grown up into like a cutthroat executive. So he sees his, old childhood friend Alien, who still comes back saying, "I love you,"
yep.
like an evil possessed Charles Boyle. And he's seeing people, just seeing him murder fools all over the place, and he's like,
Straight
"You
up.
shouldn't do that. This is bad." But also, yeah, I'm on board.
It's like, yeah,
I'm cool
fair
with
enough.
it.
Yeah, that
I
sucks.
mean, it's not
Whatever.
how I would do things, but what, like whatever, man. And I've lost my train of thought here.
Oh no, just keep
Is
going.
is
Like
that
this is
ranking?
exactly the game.
But it's the ranking thing because what like
Mm,
got me is, and I had been playing quite a lot of Ghost of Tsushima in my like kind of backlog and getting quite into it, and I freaking love the combat in that game, especially for an open world game. I think they, especially with standoffs, they did a very good job of like using that as a means of communicating how you're supposed to approach the combat, and that parrying is very important, and you shouldn't just go in there and try and combo everything. And I come to this, and it's like first step, and I went back and forth to like see if it was nuts, and I made myself worse at both games because the button allocations is like a little bit different. Like this is not a
it took a
universal.
bit for me to get used to. Mm.
And then I got used to one, and then I got used to the other, and got used to the, and it kind of went
Switching
back
back
and
and forth
forth.
is always a
The
bad
the
idea.
real issue here, though, is because I goes like, okay, so you're saying you're like Shadow of the Colossus, except instead of high art, you're like somebody went into Quentin Tarantino's personal video library and just cut a bunch of random bits of tape together.
Quentin
The
Tarantino would
difference,
love this game.
it the difference is, so they're very different games, but Shadow of the Colossus there's nothing in between, and like each boss is its own challenge, and you understand what you're doing in that challenge. You learn it as you go. No More Heroes 3 at least literally just throws all these tutorials at you, and it
Hmm.
kind of knows it's doing it, but then you're kind of just left to your devices, and you get thrown into these wild, crazy boss fights, and you're just not familiar enough with the combat system at all, and it's
Yep.
overworld is so empty, and you could argue if that's like an intentional choice or not. But I'm at the point where I'm going, I just wish like even random enemies wandering around would be better than to drive up to this spot and just take on a few waves again. Like it feels like you're trying to learn Street Fighter in the most boring way possible. Where it's just
Thank
like
you.
beat these guys
Yeah.
again and beat these guys again and beat these guys again. Like there's a really good wide linear game in here masquerading as a semi-open world. And the game is at
That's
its best when it's not in its quote unquote open world.
I absolutely agree. And this was my big criticism of my review, and I don't remember verbatim what I wrote. but I remember exactly how it feels. I feel like a lot of games have what I call a circle. So when you
I would
start a game,
say
you got
you don't call it a circle; it is a circle. But go on.
it is a circle. Yeah, let's go. It's they've got the circle, but they start off, and the game starts off amazing, right? It's like introducing these new things, the character, the setting, the combat, whatever, and it feels all fresh and cool, and it feels new and shiny, and then they're cool. Like this is like getting you used to the game, and then it goes into the circle, and the circle will loop around as many times as it needs to before the developers say 30 hours is enough. Let's get you to the end now. And what the circle usually is like the series of things you do, like until you get to the end. But it's the same thing.
Or until
Or
you get to
maybe
the next beat, I guess you would say.
exactly. And you nailed it when you said about the open world and the in between the boss fights. Clearly, the best thing about this game were the boss fights. I didn't know what to expect. They all felt different. They were fun, quirky, funny. Like it was just good, and some of them were very challenging. Like you really had to pay attention to what was happening, otherwise you weren't going to win. You couldn't just walk it in. But the in between part, the open world, straight up isn't that good. They have things like mini games and stuff you can do, but essentially all you're
Kind
doing.
of dig some of the mini games actually, like
I got bored
collecting
of them.
trash and like wrestling move gators is not something I would base a game around. But like as a mini game, it's very easy to understand. It's very easy to pick up. It's incredibly stupid in the best possible way.
What was the tanks in your like shooting? What were you
don't think I've
shooting
done
that were
anything with
coming
tanks
towards
yet.
the beach? Anyway, there's um, they all kind of like I wanted more things like that. But essentially, what you'll end up doing is just finding those areas to fight random enemies or
Getting
random
enough
groups of
currency
enemies,
and then registering for the next fight is the
and
progression.
that's boring.
And my
That
issue is like it's not preparing you for the type, because I feel like a good
yeah,
boss fight in general is, and I'm hardly the first person to say this, is it's kind of like the exam for everything you've learned until then. The problem is it's not teaching you anything in between the boss fights,
not a
which
thing.
sucks because like again, I want to like, which is why I keep on saying when this game's at its best, it's phenomenal. And a part of me is like, is it possible to score a game an A minus and a C plus at the same time?
Yeah, I felt absolutely torn, and when I was rereading my review or skimming through it, I should say, I always read my conclusion because it's like some sort of consolidation or of my thoughts about like who is the person that would play this game? Is there a person that would can play this game? And in this case, there is, but there's also people that wouldn't.
And it's
Obviously,
kind
people
of hard to know who's going to be who is a weird thing because,
like because it's so weird. It's such a weird game, right?
but you could
Like,
enjoy the weird, but like be put off by other things. Like I
yep,
super enjoy the weird.
yep,
Like
me
the
too. But
presentation of this game, mwah, chef's kiss.
that bit in between, like getting enough currency to then go fight the boss, that's not weird. It's just repetitive, and it got really monotonous.
And it
And
doesn't
that's not a
teach you
small
anything
part.
is my big issue. It's like I could even deal with it
Yeah.
being like a little bit like treading water if I
Hmm.
felt like I was learning something meaningful. But what's happened, I'm only literally in the second, or I guess ninth ranked boss now. And like what I found is
Hmm.
okay, I kind of was able to use those very, very, very standard enemies as practicing against to learn the basics of the controls. But I, as soon as I'm in a much tougher fight, it's like, oh, I don't know how to utilize this in a useful way for this fight at all. I am going to die very, very soon. Um, I do like the sushi stands.
Yeah.
I want
I
to give
mean,
this game
that's
some
was
positive
that.
due. I like the Itadakimasu song is funny. Like it really leans into how much of a nerd Travis really is.
Yes. Like what Taku.
Yeah. I
He's
don't know if
totally
that's
that.
like quite right because he just seems more of a generation, like he's just like a generic loser in general. Like it's like otaku implies anime and like certain streams of video
That's a
games,
good
and like
point.
there
Yeah.
is more loserness to him than that. He's
Even
like
though
the
I look at
dude
him,
from The
I'm
Big
like, oh, I'd love
Lebowski,
hanging out with this
except
guy.
except I would much rather hang out with the dude from The Big Lebowski.
And yet he's this amazing fighter.
It's perfect. I mean, like amazing fighter. Like early on, you've got so the original one was one of the first and only Wii games that was on my radar. The problem was like many people, I bought a Wii and then 2 games later sold it again when I kind of saw where that thing was going.
Hmm.
So I never actually played it. So like that's kind of partly why I was intrigued by this key. It was like, I've always wanted to play that original one and just never gotten around to it. This is a really good excuse for it. So you've got like two sidekicks like very, very early on when you're outside this hotel.
Yep.
And again, while you're in these like properly designed locations, it feels great. But
Yes.
like very early on, like you got this like son of foxy, weird, kind of kinky anime chick. And like she comes in to save your life, and then a guy just rips her arms off, and then like the
Yeah,
entire
just straight
screen is
up.
just saturated with blood.
But she's okay.
And Travis is not Goku. Like it doesn't seem like he's the sort of guy who can take it when she can't. Like, but whatever. That's the game this is, and I do appreciate like its knowing stupidity. I like all the talks about Takashi Miike. I have not watched one of his films in a long time, but that explains a lot of the violence.
I would say that despite the fact that I found the earning enough currency to get to the next boss that part was boring, the boss fights and the lead ups and all that sort of stuff was so fun that I would do it to get there instead of just going, I can't do this. Like we've all played those games where it really feels like a job to play the game. And
Yeah.
I've got a list. I've got a list of games that are like that.
You
And
actually have a list?
I wrote a list. Any game that I reviewed, it's a small list of games that I go like these games are just abysmal, horrible, were a chore. And then I've got a list of games that on the other side that are just out of the gate amazing, some of the best games I've ever played, and a bunch of the somewhere in the middle, right? But this one, as we keep on pointing out, is like, do I give it an A minus or a C plus? I kind of want to give it both, and I kind of feel that's where scoring really does fail. Is because we want to score one aspect a C plus, we want to score the other aspect an A minus. So do we just aggregate it and call it a B plus? Or
reminds me of the issue you have with like the annual big shooters, where like the campaign and the multiplayer should basically have their own separate. So like maybe the campaign's incredible, but the multiplayer sucks and nobody's going to be there, or vice versa, and it almost I guess one thing I should actually really touch on, since I have been playing the PS5 version, is this game. This kind of part goes back to me like saying I don't see the benefit of this being on a handheld other than it helping me. And apparently it runs like garbage on the Switch. I searched on Digital Foundry a little bit before we started this, and the heading to the video is tech issues impact a roller coaster of a game. But it's sharp on PS. I mean, as it should be. It is very sharp on PS5. And like that has to be 60 frames a second locked. Like I refuse to believe it'd be anything. And it's and you know what? If I didn't know it was a Switch version, you told me you would not get me to believe it was a native Returnal level PS5 game. But if you told me this was a standard like PS4, PS5 cross generational design with the hardware in mind thing, aside from some crappy water effects, I would believe you because the style is so strong. It really does actually look.
I would expect it to look and run a lot better. I didn't have any issues with how it ran on the Switch. Like I never died or mistimed a jump or anything like that because of like some slowdown or some glitchiness or anything like that. So in terms of how it ran and how it looked, absolutely fine. I'm used to that sort of stuff. That being said, if I was to play this game on the PS5, I'd expect 60 frames per second, 4K screen, everything, all the bells and whistles.
You get that, and it actually looks great. It looks like this is how it should be played.
So you're 4 to 5 hours in. Let's just call it a 5. You've just beaten the 9th ranked boss.
I'm actually paused in the middle of a fight with the 9th ranked boss because the thing that took me away from home when I thought I was going to have a chat, like some life, work, whatever crisis, kind of like caused me to like just hard pause that. I should have probably been into the 8th boss, and then life gets in the way.
I must admit, like the spacing as well as the grinding for the currency between each boss it was timed well enough that they were good places to save and then come back to. And some games really struggle with that sort of thing where it's like, if you're just a busy person, you're a parent, or whatever, you don't have much time. If you have this ability to sit down for say 40 minutes to play a game, but you've progressed enough where you feel like, oh, that's the next, I've done this part, I'm going to do the next part, but I'm going to stop and save it here. I'm going to go do my house chores or anything, and I'll come back in a few hours, and then I'll do the next part. It does that really, really well. And I also
It's
like that it
still
wasn't easy. A lot of games like this, if the boss battles were just a complete walkover, like just you push them over, they're dead. It's like it's easy to figure out, it's easy to beat. If that was the case, I really would have gone a lot more critical on this because I mean, I don't know how you. I can't remember the 10th and ninth boss, but did you have any troubles with either of those guys?
10th, no, ninth. I think I died the first time very, very quickly.
Yep.
So I think easy to figure out would be good, but I think what I want is like something that just requires you to stay like a little bit locked in.
Yes. Yeah. Like alert. Like I need to
But I
actually
would
do.
like
I
to know
can't
what's
just
going
mash
on. I
buttons.
think the thing that you should have had so far is like the challenges up until then did not teach you enough about the
And
sort
they
of
still
shit that
won't.
might happen to you.
Yeah, they still won't. And
Um,
the battles get really unique, even further on, where it's like the only time you're doing that sort of combat and that sort of style of fighting is kind of just in that. And I think that would have been a much better idea. Like, if
I would have
you're
preferred
forced
it
to
to
go,
honestly just be like, even if they went like Killer 7 level, and Killer 7, I actually legitimately loved Killer 7. Like, but if it was just straight up running down corridors and doing like properly just paced and segregated and learning fights, I think I would still. And then like a mini game on your motorbike, which would actually be kind of fun. I think
yeah,
I personally would have preferred that to this empty R city.
it is empty. It's pretty clear they just went with a map, and then they went, "Oh, what can we add on the map?" It's like, "Oh, this
I
new
just feel like
section."
they maybe didn't have the budget to do anything interesting with it, but that's what No More Heroes was, so that's what it had to be. I mean, I don't know what went on in the creative
No, neither
rooms.
do I. And but I mean, we both seem to agree on the emptiness and the things that they throw in there. Um, it's not exactly like the map was designed around it. It's more like here's an area in the map, just go
Yeah.
where that dot is. And some of the maps are a real grind to just get around.
At
I
least there is
remember,
fast travel, which, especially if you're on a, S, very fast hard drive console, is gonna be a nice addition to have, perhaps. I know what the load times are like on
yes,
the Switch, but the Psy implies that maybe they were not great.
yeah, some of the I just remember some of them when you're like trying to find like new sections to go to, like go in this area here and then it highlighted it for you. It wasn't that hard to find, but what made it hard was to actually get there.
Yeah, I got
Uh
lost already once actually,
yeah,
just because the map marker's not super clear and like you're just on the wrong
that's
side of the
it.
fence. And how do you get around there? And it's sometimes
And
it's
it's
like
just like it's a
you
fence. I
can't.
could just
It's got a big invisible wall problem.
that's what I hate. I hate invisible walls, and I think the wasteland map or section, I forget what it was called. Sorry, but that whole area just really bugged me because of all the invisible walls. So essentially, for people who haven't played it, you go in there and you kind of like go down these dirt roads, and there's like ruins of like houses and stuff each side. And sometimes you have to go in there and kind of like go around. It's like this maze, but it's a maze that doesn't make sense because it's like, oh, you can get here, but oh, if you want to get to that section, you have to get out, move over to the side, move up here a little bit, come in through that little way, and then go up. And it's not obvious. And the only way that you start traversing that a lot better is when you start just going through it countless times over and over again. So,
And you
and
just kind
then
of
you're
have to
just
learn it.
remembering the path. That's it. And I mean, like they even seem to like give up on the areas towards the end there as well, man. So yeah, you go to a few and then like, oh, now you have to go back there. Oh, now you have to go back there. Nothing's
Hmm.
changed. It's the same place. And that was where those parts started feeling like filler. But I guess
I
my
feel like the
brain just
overworld
started.
does feel like filler. I think it's like like it just doesn't
It
need to
probably
be
is.
there. Um,
Yeah, it doesn't. And that's where it's like when you kind of come to it, it's like that bit starts to feel like the chore, but it's not the whole game. It's just part of the game. And that
mm,
part, the churi part, was like if you just beat a boss battle and you go, okay, I know I've got to go to this new section. I've got to start fighting these random mobs so I can earn enough currency. Save it because I just don't have the energy to go through that right now. Whereas if a game is fun to play and aspects of the combat and everything else is just good, or if every time you went to a mob it was as you said, it's like, oh, this is kind of they've changed, they're training you to fight the next boss and it's going
yeah.
to get you good at this mechanic or something like that, that would be so much better because then you want to play that, you want to go fight more mobs. and maybe you enjoy it so much, it's like
And it
I
would
earned enough
feel super
currency.
satisfying to have like, yeah. It would
Yep.
trick you into thinking you were smart, which is like something a lot of the
Yes.
best
Yeah.
games actually do. Yeah, this one's just it's just such a weird one to like recommend it for or against. Like I think it's my least favorite Suda 51 game in the skin of what should be my favorite of the Suda 51 games. I haven't like actually played that many, but like you know, they you kind of remember them. They have personality, if nothing else, because it's like we've talked like quite a lot of shit about this,
Yes.
but at its best, it's still
It's
pretty freaking
it's
good.
pretty
Like the
good.
good bits are pretty good.
And I hope I got that across in my review where I said the boss battles, that the lead up to them, the boss battles themselves, then the outro of the boss battle are really fun. And overall, the style of the game is really fun.
The style
Like,
is, yeah.
yeah. And that's where I'd say, like, look, those parts are really, really good. But just don't go into it and think that all of it's going to be that, because it has this one aspect that is in between those parts, and that part gets old real, real quick. And if you're happy to like play a game like that, then it's an A
Guess if your
plus.
life allows just a week of grinding, then a weekend of fun.
Yeah, okay, yeah, we'll go with that. But
Um,
it's a long weekend, so
all right. Okay, you know what? A weekend, you know what? 2 days of grinding and then a day of fun. Whatever. It's
yeah, okay,
a bit more
I'll go
imbalance
with
than that.
that. Yeah, and that's why I feel like I needed to be fair to the game, because there are a lot of good things going for it. And if you can walk away with a game with a lot of happy memories, and you know the fact is like, oh yeah, that part was fun. It's like great. And yes, there is this other part. Don't ignore it, but don't ignore the good parts of it. I personally felt the combat was actually really nice for the vast majority of it, and I did feel
When
like
I'm
over time I was getting better at it.
Yeah, that's the. I feel like I'm at this hump, and like if this combat could just, and it would help if I wasn't playing other games at the same time. This is maybe a game to be completely
That's
immersed
a rough
in.
one with this one,
With
man.
no,
It's a game that I kind of feel has its own pace and style, especially in the combat, where you can't just waltz in and expect to just be the best. Like even those mobs that we talk about,
it's
even
not that.
like
It's just like the button I pressed isn't doing what I expected it to because I'm conflating it with other combat systems. Is the issue like that? And like just like getting to the feel of it, like you need to like I think you need to be dedicated. Like
yes, yeah,
you need to
because it
be able
has
to
it
know
has its own
exactly what you're
unique
doing.
feel. I, I actually think I remember, like you, early on, and I mean really early on, having difficulties with like how the buttons were set up, and it
Mm.
seemed like that was actually a common thing that people were talking about with it. But I guess like any game, it wasn't so obtuse that like, oh, you will never get used to this. Clearly, you do. But if you're chopping and changing between, especially other like say like third person combat things, maybe
Character
more,
action-ish games.
yeah, then that's clearly going to make your brain have these like
Because it
cross
also like
wires.
again, that's why I mentioned like I went back to Tsushima. I like actually went back and forth, and I found it like both games messed each other up for me.
Yes, I find the same with if you've ever played a fighting game, let's just say Street Fighter. Typically speaking, you have two different types of characters. You have like motion controls to the one punch, and then you've got charge for another, where it's like hold back for 2 seconds, then forward in the button or whatever. And if you switch characters, like if you're playing say 20 games with someone, and then 15 games in you go, oh, I'm going to switch characters to this other one, you'll find that you're still instinctively doing
Yeah,
things that existed on the old character, and it's like, no, you're playing this character now, he
you're
can't do
playing
that.
No More Heroes now. You're not
Yeah.
playing this
Yeah,
other action game. Anyway, I think we're pretty much just about ready to wrap this up.
I think so, yeah. Final thoughts on it. Like I want you to
It's
go first, because I want to
if
see where
ever
you're
there
at
was
with
a
it at the
game that
moment.
needed a demo, like honestly,
It's,
because
oh
my
dear.
my I mean that is kind of like where I stand. Is like at its best, this game is very very good. It's just when it's not at its best, it's kind of, at least so far, and it sounds speaking to you like it's not going to change, kind of a chore, and it doesn't do enough to onboard you for when it will be at its best, and maybe it's a quote unquote personal responsibility thing to like get there. So it sounds like if the weirdness of this seems like your thing, and you're willing. It's one of those
To
cases
work
where
to
you're going to
get
get
it.
out what you put in,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to be aware of that going in. Like you're going to have to, by just based on my own playtime, put in at least 5 hours. Preferably without jumping back into Bayonetta or something else that's about to come out around the corner. Because that's going to mess up your feel for the combat system.
Yes.
Then
Yeah.
definitely give it a look.
I completely agree. I mean, having played it quite a few more hours than yourself, I felt that way for most of it, and right at the end there, that summed up exactly the conclusions that I came to with the review, where it's like, okay, lots of things I like, but and I think maybe my final thought, and it's very much just a spur of the moment thing I'm thinking of right now, is that maybe the reasons the boring parts seem more boring is because the non-boring parts are so over the top, so extra, funny, eccentric, weird, and I like that. And then to go from that,
I really
yeah,
think
it's like
just
it's almost
both.
like an extreme end of both scales, whereas like it's gone from this to this, and
It's
that's
like they
why.
just poured all of the salt into the soup and they had nothing else left at the end. Like,
There you go. That's it, man.
and I'm just gonna say that's our thoughts on No More Heroes 3. Yeah, Adam, thanks for joining me in, like, because I could not hold this thing by myself. I would just look like a crazy person. And of course, if you want to see Adam's full, we will not be reviewing the PS5 version that I've been playing because that would be mostly redundant. But if you want to see
Probably.
Adam's original review from a year and a month or so ago, then player2.net.au. It's still there. It's going to be there for as long as the site exists, which will hopefully be a while. I will probably come back with some more thoughts on this. I'm going to play this for like a few more hours at least. And then in a couple of episodes' time, check out the Player 2 Pixelcast. I'll probably have updated thoughts on there in 2 or 3 weeks' time, I'm guessing. The next episode of that will be a PAX special, which I actually live in Japan, so I will not be a part of that. But the episode after, I'm going to be like the only person
After
alone.
that. Yes.
I do fully intend to like update on this. I think I owe it to myself and probably people who are confused by watching this video. So yeah, please, if you enjoyed this, like the channel, subscribe, whatever it is they tell you to do. I actually don't care. It's just apparently this is what you say at
We're
the end
old.
of
We
YouTube
don't know.
videos now. Player2.net.au. Eh.
Peace out, everyone.
Strawberry. I don't understand.
I hope you do actually.
I don't get the berries. I don't understand. I enjoy it, but I do not understand the berries.